If I can just go ahead and
Yeah.
take off?
Yeah.
All right. Well, hi, good morning, it's still morning. My name is Jerome Horne, and I'm from IndyGo. I am our Ridership Experience Specialist, which means I get to focus on kind of the user experience of riding transit. Anything from what our bus stop signs look like, to redesigning our system maps, and all sorts of ways that we get information to our riders through technology integration and many other things. And this position is fairly new, so I'm still working on, my position is very iterative, basically, so it's constantly evolving. But today I'm excited to talk to you guys about the Red Line project. So I have some handouts I'd like to pass around to everybody here to be relevant to the discussion. Everyone here has heard about the Red Line project and knows what the Red Line is. But I'm going to break it down to you. So the Red Line is part of a much larger plan. It is not just a project in isolation. It is part of a comprehensive plan called the Marion County Transit Plan, which is really reconfiguring the entire IndyGo system, because we don't think of one project by itself. We think of the entire transit system as a network. And so it's important to understand where we like to focus transit and where we put transit, and kind of the recipe that makes transit successful. So we have pretty much our four pillars that we like to focus on: of density, walkability, continuity, and linearity. In other words, we want to put transit in places where transit is going to be successful. So density, having lots of people, places, and things close together. Walkability, it's really important to have transit in places where we have kind of a street grid and there's connections and sidewalks and infrastructure to support that, because every transit rider begins and ends their destination usually as a pedestrian. And then continuity, we want to make sure that we're putting transit lines in places where there are things on the way, not just going from one place to another, but skipping a lot of distance in between. And then linearity, we want to try to make our lines as straight as possible. We don't want to have a lot of deviating turns, and every time we have to make a turn or deviate off of a main route, that just adds time to overall travel time of a transit route. So the Marion County Transit Plan, now you have a version of this map in this handout, and I'll explain the difference between what you're looking at. Up here on the screen, what's important to see here is this is kind of what the system looks like today and what the system will look like after the implementation of the plan. Well, what's really important here is the lines are color-coded for a reason. So right now on the map on the left, the current system, anything that's green is a route that only runs once an hour. Anything is blue is a route that runs every 30 minutes. And anything that is red is a route that runs every 15 minutes. Now, those colors do not correspond to the red line, which I'll get to in a second. So really, this just demonstrates that today, there are only two routes in the IndyGo system that run every 15 minutes or better. And every 15 minutes or better in the transit industry is considered frequent service. So if it's operating at least 15 minutes or better than that, that's frequent service. We hardly have any frequent service, but the two routes that are frequent service today are our most heavily traveled routes, because they are the most useful to people because they come the most often. Another way to think about this is, imagine everyone, if you want to get in your car every morning, but you only have a 1-minute window on the hour every hour to get in your car. And that's kind of what it's like for people that rely on transit. That if you miss that and this bus only runs once an hour, then you're out of luck. You have to wait a whole another hour, and then what if that bus breaks down or something goes wrong? That's even more time. And then if you have to make a transfer, that adds an additional burden. So what you're seeing in this map on the right is that we're adding a lot more frequency, and we're putting that frequency in the densest, most walkable core parts of the city where there is a lot of people, where there is demand for ridership, but that demand is not being met. And then in addition to increasing the frequency on a lot of local routes, you'll see some slightly thicker lines, and those are the bus rapid transit or BRT lines, with the red line being one of them, and then we'll have another line called the purple line, and then the blue line. And so these BRT lines will really serve as like the central spines of our system. Most of the routes will converge into the BRT lines and allow people to make transfers, which is really similar to how it works in many other cities. The other thing you might notice, as I mentioned, on this map, it's a lot more, the lines are more squiggly, there's some duplication. Here you see things begin to straighten out a little bit more, and you begin to see somewhat of a grid form between these different maps. And so what you see in this handout here is what the system will actually look like later this year when the red line opens. So that is what, because the red line is open and that's under construction right now, we wanted to print a map that is applicable to this year. And then later on, the blue and purple lines will come on, and I'll get to those in a second. So what this really means is we're talking about shorter wait times for our riders, so they're not having to spend so much time waiting for a bus. Running every route every day of the week. That's another huge thing. So currently in the IndyGo system, on the weekends, almost half the system doesn't even run. So in this plan, every route will run every day of the week. We're also increasing the span of service every day so that every route runs from 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. Today, we have some routes, even on the weekdays, that stop around 7 or 8 p.m. And then updating our bus fleet. So that the average, who can guess what the average lifespan of a bus is? I'm just curious. Does anybody?
16 years.
16 years? Anyone else?
5 years, 10 years.
12. So 12.
Okay.
12 is the average lifespan of a bus. And we currently have some buses still running that are 20 years old. They're not unsafe, but they're unreliable. It means they require a lot more maintenance and upkeep. They break down much more frequently, and a lot of that is just because we've had a lack of funding. And now that we have more funding, we're going to be able to update our bus fleet and keep it rotating on that every 12-year cycle. And then we're upgrading our fare payment technology, and I'll get to that in just a second. This is going to create 300 full-time jobs, most of which, 200 of which are bus operators, and the other 100 are support staff, people in every other department at IndyGo, whether it's marketing, public affairs, finance, things like that. Technology and fare policy, and that is actually what is on this handout. And I'll sum it up for you. So today, to ride IndyGo, you have to have pretty much exact cash, exact change with you. And you either can buy a day pass or a one-trip pass on the bus in cash, or you can order one online ahead of time or go to our transit center downtown. Not a lot of options and not a lot of flexibility. And so what we're moving to is an account-based system that relies on either a smart card or using your mobile phone. You'll still be able to use cash to load those smart cards, but basically what this does is this allows people to be able to buy and reload their fare whenever, wherever, however they want to, pretty much. And then we're introducing, oh, I don't know why that jumped forward. We're introducing what is called fare capping. So fare capping is basically, it allows people, so today we sell like a 31-day pass or a week pass. And a 31-day pass today costs 60 bucks, or unlimited rides for the month. But what this fare capping will do is it'll be instituted on a daily and weekly basis, so that, let's say, you just pay as you go, and you earn towards a cap. So if you ride the system every day, and you ride all week, you know, you'll ride for like 3 days of the week, and by the time you hit the 4th day, the rest of your week is free, essentially, or no additional cost to you, because you've paid a certain amount of money. And because these cards are going to be hooked up to an account, they'll be able to know every time you've swiped or how much money you've loaded and things like that. So really, this is just going to give us much more flexibility and make the system easier to use. Potential for, I should say, another part of this is the potential for transit-oriented development. So what is transit-oriented development, TOD? It's really a way of building neighborhoods and maximizing investment in particularly the bus rapid transit lines, but also this could be true for some of the lines that will run every 15 minutes or better. But really, it's taking advantage of, usually when we put in every other city, when you've put in this type of thing, like a BRT or a light rail, the land near those stations becomes more valuable. And it's really a place where developers or people want to be, they want to build things, people want to live close by, because it's seen as an amenity that, you know, this is something where, oh, I don't have to rely on my car as much, or I can live car-free, or, you know, whatever have you. But really, it's about kind of maximizing the return on investment of that, having that dedicated infrastructure in the ground. So there are different typologies that this is broken down into. So our Indianapolis Metropolitan Planning Organization, or the MPO, they are an organization that kind of oversees all of the planning and some of the zoning practices for the city, along with our Department of Metropolitan Development at the City of Indianapolis. And so it's for each station. So I didn't bring that map with me, I apologize, but it basically has a map of the whole BRT system, and each stop kind of gets assigned to one of these typologies. So the first two you see, CBD, Commercial Business District, this is pretty much downtown Indianapolis, and areas right within kind of the mile square or pretty close to that, and that's really the only place in the transit plan that qualifies as that. Then district centers, you can think of this, some existing examples of a district center would be a place like Fountain Square or Broad Ripple, places that they're dense, but they're nowhere, as dense as downtown. They're not really necessarily high-rise buildings and things, but there's still a good core of activity and people. And then the two other are commercial centers. So there are a lot of places around the city, particularly on our blue and purple line BRTs in the future, and when we extend the red line, where there are old strip shopping malls and places that have big parking lots, and they're just kind of sitting there not really being utilized. A lot of those areas potentially could be developed and turned into mixed-use development and other things like that sometime in the future. And then we have walkable neighborhood with a mixed-use center. So this could be other places like up and down College Avenue that are not quite in the center of Broad Ripple, but College Avenue itself is kind of a good example of there are all these nodes like at 52nd Street and 54th Street where that's where the streetcar ran, and those were streetcar stops, so there are business nodes that have clustered around there. And there's some other examples of this around the city and other places. So this is just a kind of advisory guide. There's nothing set in stone about what will happen at BRT stations or surrounding BRT stations. The city is still working through some policies about adopting transit-oriented development plans and what that could mean, but it's very much still a work in progress. Plan. We started back in last year updating, we added what we call frequency to some of the routes. It's not going to change very much, so some of them are running more often, and we've already seen a ridership increase on those routes that are coming more often. Red line construction began last June, and we anticipate red line construction, or substantial construction of the red line, will wrap up July 31st. That is what the new date is. And then we are anticipating an opening date Labor Day weekend for the red line. At the same time that the red line opens, we're going to change the rest of the routes to match this map that's on the inside of this handout. So basically overnight, we're going to do a big switch and flip, and really kind of just what we call flipping the switch and turn on the network. That seems kind of crazy, but we've had a few other cities that have done it this way. It's just it's much easier to change everything at once rather than try to go back in and do things piecemeal. And then we have the two other BRT lines, so the purple line, and I'll describe that purple line basically will start from downtown at the transit center, just down the street here, and will go north up, make its way over to Meridian Street and go north up Meridian all the way to 38, so it'll actually share a section with the red line for a little bit. Then it will continue on East 38th Street out to Post Road, and then up Post Road into Fort Bend and terminate at the Ivy Tech campus there. So that'll be the purple line. That'll be the next one that comes on board. And then we'll have the blue line. The blue line will run east and west straight across Washington Street from Cumberland in the east to the airport in the west. And then that'll be the last line to come on board. The blue and purple lines are progressively much more complicated from an engineering standpoint and more expensive. A lot of that has to do with 38th Street and Washington Street requiring a lot more work to get those streets fixed. And most of these projects, they're not just transit projects. We are adding in new drainage, particularly on the purple line, we're adding in 6.5 miles of sidewalk that don't exist today. And then same thing on the blue line, there's going to be a lot, particularly on West Washington Street, there's a lot of work that has to be done to just bring the street up and improve crosswalks and fix traffic lights and signals and things like that. And then the red line will be extended to the county line. So that will be extended all the way north to 96th Street and down to County Line Road as part of that plan, and that will probably coincide with the opening of the blue line. Rapid transit is, so BRT for short, and this is inside of your handout here. But really, this gives you, BRT is really giving the bus, it's really a bus that acts more like a train than a bus. And it has a set of dedicated features that allows it to be rapid. So for one, we have, where possible in most cases, it runs in its own dedicated lanes. And so that's one big thing, is it has its own dedicated right-of-way that allows it not to be impeded so much by traffic. The other thing it has is what is called transit signal priority. So that is a computer system that is hooked up to each bus. Each bus has a GPS and a receiver, and all the traffic lights are all hooked up together. And they talk to each other, and they know where all the buses are, and as they're approaching a traffic signal, that TSP system can give the bus a little bit of priority, where it can extend a green cycle a little bit longer, so if the bus is approaching, it can just keep going through and not have to wait at so many red lights or wait as long. So that also helps shave off time. The other thing that speeds this up is, we're not just stopping at a bus stop on the side of the street. These are actual stations. So they are level boarding stations. So the platform is actually 15 inches high, and it matches the floor height of the bus. And the bus literally pulls up right next to it, just like a subway or a light rail train might do in another city. And so it's really seamless boarding. You'll be able to board through any door because you will have already paid. And there's off-board fare payment. So the way that works is either you've paid using the mobile app, or you've used the ticket vending machine at the station to purchase a ticket. That way, when the vehicle shows up, you're not going up to the operator. You're just, people are getting on, they're getting off. Oh, doors open, doors close. We're moving. It's just much faster. And then you're saying, well, how do people verify that we paid? So it is based on what is called the honor system, and this is not, we're not the first people to do this. Every light rail and BRT system that exists pretty much in the world does this the same way, where there will be fare inspectors. So we will have people that are employed that will randomly board vehicles at any time throughout the day and basically ask for proof of payment. You can think of it like a conductor walking down the train, looking for tickets. So it would work kind of the same way. And there's a fine and a fee associated for different violations. I'm not really sure what those are quite yet, but that's how that system will work. Accessible. So everything about the system, there's a gradual ramp that leads up to the height of the station platform so that people can get up to that 15-inch height. So the red line, specifically phase 1, and this is what is under construction right now, is 13.5 miles from 66th Street on College and making its way down to the University of Indianapolis around Shelby and Hanna. There are 28 stations in that segment. 60% of this segment is in dedicated lanes. So I talked about having its own lanes, and that's pretty much from downtown for the transit center north to Broad Ripple is the section that has dedicated lanes. The section on Virginia and Shelby, there are no dedicated lanes. And part of that is one, because those are 2-lane roads. There really wasn't any space to widen the roads, and we didn't want to do that because we would have to take property, and we weren't interested in taking property. So. Plus, traffic volumes on those streets are not quite as high, and with the transit signal priority and a few other features that we'll have, it's still going to be faster than a regular bus. The other thing you notice, these 28 stations are spaced about every half mile. A normal bus stop today could be every 1/8 to every 1/4 of a mile. So that's another key that speeds this up, is we're not stopping every single block or stopping as often. We will be operating from 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. Every 10 minutes, from like 5 to 7 a.m. it'll be every 15, and then starting from 7 a.m. to about 8 or 9 p.m. it'll be every 10 minutes, and then it'll drop back off. And that's pretty consistent with how these lines work in other cities. We will be using the bendy buses, or the articulated buses. They're 60 feet long, and these will be electric buses. They're very quiet. They're eerily quiet. We have one right now. We're getting a few more, but it's like they're on, and you don't even know that it's running. And then right now we're projecting 11,000 trips per day on just the red line, segment 1. So so this is a pretty good idea with the station at Broad Ripple Avenue and Broad Ripple near the parking garage and Hopcat, what that will look like.
So there's not going to be any street parking anymore on College?
There will not be any street parking where there is a station. So where there is a station, that parking will go away, and those locations in between the stations, any parking that exists today will still remain there. So about 80% of the existing parking will remain there, about 20% will go away on that section on College. And then this is another example of, so as you can see, this is an example of the station at 52nd, and where this station is located is actually south of the intersection, so where there was on-street parking right by the station, that parking will go away in that particular section. And I don't know why this picture is so pixelated, but here's an example of a center platform station. So you were just looking at a rendering. This is, and I apologize for the picture not being so clear, but this is real life. This is what's under construction right now. This happens to be at Meridian and 22nd, but it's the same type of station. So this is currently where progress is with a station that's under construction. And then this one's really good. This is another center station at 30th and Meridian. So here's the rendering, and that's real life right now. So as you can see, we're making our way there. The other thing that's important to note about these stations, so there are two types. There are center platforms that will be in the middle of the street in the dedicated lane portions, and then there will be curb platforms that are on the side of the street in the non-dedicated lane sections. So this is an example of what the station in Fountain Square will look like. All of these stations will have real-time electronic signs that will let you know when the next buses are coming. They'll also have PA systems and automatic announcements that will announce as the vehicles are approaching and the destination of the vehicles as well. And then this is an example of a side platform that's currently under construction. This happens to be Pleasant Run on the south side, but and this one even has the wood planks for the roof canopy installed. And then I mentioned we're using electric buses. This is an example of the bus. This is the first one that came in. And the other thing that allows this to work really well is that this bus has 5 doors. So, and they're on both sides. So it's 5 doors, 3 on one side, 2 on, so 3 on the right, 2 on the left. Because of the different types of stations with the center and curb platforms, very similar to a train. So as mentioned, we broke ground back in June of last year. Construction will take 13 months, and then we have a period of testing and startup where we'll run the line and kind of simulate it like it's in operation and kind of go through different scenarios and things like that. And then, as I mentioned, we're targeting Labor Day for opening, Labor Day weekend, probably Sunday, September 1st, actually. We haven't officially announced that, but that's what we're looking at for opening. IndyGoRed.com. This is a really great resource that shows you that we keep up to date. This website is dedicated solely to this project. There's also an IndyGoPurple.com and an IndyGoBlue.com as well for those particular lines if you're interested in learning more about those. But on this website you can find particularly construction information. That page is always constantly being updated with what we call the three-week look ahead. And that includes projections from our construction contractor of the different segments that they're working on and what's happening. You can also sign up for updates. If you scroll to the bottom of any page, you'll see this sign up for updates. And if you just enter in your email address, you'll be entered onto that list. And that 3-week look ahead is sent out every Monday morning at about 6 or 7 a.m. And updated with the latest information about what's happening with the project. This investment in public transportation, we have autonomous vehicles and all these other things that are coming. It's going to make public transportation irrelevant. Well, maybe. No, probably not. And really what that comes down to is, especially in bigger and denser cities, and as Indianapolis continues to grow, this will become a problem. If we look at the space required to transport people, this is really what it gets down to. 60 people on bicycles versus the space they take up on a bus versus everyone in their own vehicle driving by themselves. There's a big space difference here. As you drive, everyone has to park their car somewhere. And that takes up space. Not to mention then your car, if you drive it to work, then you park it to sit there, but then, when you go home, you have to have a place to store it as well, and anywhere else you go in between, you always have to park it somewhere. And so there's a lot of space that's being taken up in our cities by parking and spaces for cars. And so really, it's all about space. Technology is not changing geometry, and that's why, this is what 60 people in their private cars, Uber, Lyft, or driverless car, if it's still the same size as a regular car, it's still taking up space. So driverless bus, if and when we get to that point, will really be, kind of an awesome advantage. While right now, of course, Indianapolis, we have a lot of our streets, particularly downtown, are extremely wide, much wider than in some other cities. And we don't really have a lot of real traffic congestion yet. So, but as the city continues to grow, we want to make sure that we have options and that we have capacity built in to give people options, because that's really what this transit system and improving the transit system is about, is giving people options so that you don't have to have a car just to survive or enjoy the amenities of the city. Part of the presentation, and now I'm happy to go into question and answer, and I'm going to sit down if that's all right.